Welcome, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. Welcome to tonight's reading and discussion with poet Walter Bargen. My name is Lauren Williams, and I am one of the Adult and Community Services Managers for the Columbia Public Library, which is part of the Daniel Boone Regional Library System. Tonight, we are pleased to have with us Walter Bargen. He has published 25 books of poetry, and his recent books include Days Like This Are Necessary, New and Selected Poems, published in 2009, Trouble Behind Glass Doors, 2013, Perishable Kingdoms, 2017, Too Quick for the Living in 2017, My Other Mother's Red Mercedes, one of my favorites, in 2018, Until Next Time, published in 2019, and then his most recent works, Pole Dancing in the Nightclub of God, published just this year, 2020, and You Wounded Miracle, which is hot off the presses and actually has a publication date of 2021. His awards include a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, Chester H. Jones Foundation Award, and the William Rockhill Nelson Award. And he was appointed the first Poet Laureate of Missouri in 2008 and 2009. So thank you all for being here. And now I'll turn things over to Walter.
Thank you, Lauren. That was wonderful. And thank you for helping me figure out how to do some of these things on the computer. I'd like to welcome all of you to this reading. And I do have this feeling that I need to make some adjustments in terms of a reading as opposed to an in-person reading. And one of the things that I've been known to do in the past is roll up my cuffs on my pants in order to display what I consider to be my poetry socks. But since I can't do that, I thought maybe I would go ahead and wear my socks for a few minutes anyway on top of my head. So you could begin to get a sense of how I'm trying to warm up to doing this reading. One of the thoughts that came to mind, oh my gosh, maybe I should just make this a potpourri. Unfortunately, I know you guys don't, and I don't have any rolling papers. So this is going to be a potpourri of poems that I'm going to read to you. The first one I'm going to read is an old saw, and I'm going to sharpen my old saw. Actually, here it is. I have a saw, an old saw, and I should probably go ahead and put on put on safety glasses, so in case sparks fly from my old saw, they don't get in my eye. But I forgot one thing that was important to do this, and that is the file, so you won't get to experience me doing a sharpening of a handsaw. But we will begin to talk about carburetors, since most of you don't have carburetors any longer, and that's from another age. Just joking. The poem that I'm going to read to you is called Harmonic Balance. It comes from a book titled, the poem is called Harmony Tornado, and the book is called Harmonic Balance. It was published in 2001. All the poems take place in the town of Harmony, which seems to be something I do. I imagine little towns and then populate them with poems. So, Harmony Tornado. I was too old to believe it when the wind started picking up more than candy wrappers and Coke cans. I thought I still had a long way to go, but I could tell it was time to roll up the car windows before rain soaked the seats. I walked down the porch step, mind you, not running, leaving the rest of the congregation standing under the roof. Before I had closed the doors to the passenger side of the car, I was face to face with a swirling demon. I yelled, but there was nothing anybody could do. I was sure this was maker meeting time as I bounced from hood to hood, Continental to Chrysler, tossed in the air above the poplars that were growing beside the parking lot, but not anymore, then dropped in the soggy ditch as if I wasn't good enough. My glasses were on the lawn of the house across the street, my Bible next door in the rose bushes, and my wallet 2 blocks away near an overturned mailbox. I guess you could say I was a man about town. When the congregation crawled out from under the heavy oak pews, everyone was shouting, "Miracle, miracle." All I know is next week, when I attend a Bible Baptist church, I'm going to pray a lot harder and listen to the Sunday morning weather report. Okay. One other old saw, and it's the reason why I'm wearing this shirt with hundreds of horseshoes, most of which are angled upward to fill with luck. This is called When the Cows Come Home. Also from Harmonic Balance. Where my friend and I camped once a year, late in the summer, was between high pine-studded hills. It was my grandfather's dairy farm, and the herds pastured there sometimes, but not recently enough to crop the grass back. We cut a wide circle and pitched a canvas tent. Nights were already chilly, and I decided to collect firewood along the edge of the field. My friend stayed in the tent to arrange the food, flashlight, axe, water bottles, and whatever else we hauled from the house. From the pines, I saw a Holstein herd, 12 cows plodding toward the pond, the tent directly in their path. I dropped the wood and ran, but they'd already reached the clearing. Bovine curiosity had lined them up, shoulder to shoulder, crowding together, packing in their thick, curly heads to stare into the odd opening, their wide eyes swimming behind black and white snouts, hardly smart enough to ask the question to the answer they found. My friend, a dedicated coward, trapped in the tent, pressed against the back wall, lunged for the pistol loaded with blanks and fired wildly. The cows, too close together to turn around, too stunned to run forward, too shocked to back up, and wedged together by their fear, rose in unison on awkward hind legs, their front hooves galloping in the air, udders indecently exposed, a chorus line of herbivores. And as if on cue, they emptied themselves of an afternoon's grazings, covering the entire circle of cut grass, the tent inside and out, sleeping bags, firewood. After bowing to their own abundance, they came down running away from a world that had suffered a mammoth, overripe hemorrhage, and back to the barn where they didn't give milk for days. Both of those poems are in Days Like This Are Necessary, new and selected poems. Okay, let me see here. Oh, okay. One more warm-up poem. Maybe I've already done too many, but this is about a telephone call that I received about 20 years after I'd written up this short little poem, and it was published in a small literary magazine. And this was a call from a stranger, and I was puzzled by it. This is called Utterly Again, and it's in my book, Too Quick for the Living. A man calls from across the country. He's urgent as cumulus clouds, crowded in a phone booth at Atlantic and Boardwalk. I hear him clearly speaking out of the grip of my hand, the rain of his syllables flooding my ear. He's calling me about the last 2 lines to a poem published 20 years ago in a small South Dakota literary magazine. I don't hear thunder or the drumming of a downpour, but he's persistent, urgent, 40 years old, working at an engineering firm that won't promote him until he completes a degree in anything. The poem describes cattle mutilation, the details that turn our heads away even as our eyes move farther down the page. There's the irony of someone, them, traveling light years, hundreds of millions of miles to surgically remove the right ear and eye, the tongue and udder, all the blood and the sexual organs, from a grazing Angus, the highest life form in a tick-infested back 40. We talk for half an hour. He says each morning for a week he's repeated those last two lines, and the one they take is a stranger to us all. I mumble something about Descartes, consciousness, the mind, the mind-body duality of Western culture. I don't believe I've helped. He says it's just what he needed to finish his paper. I ask who is teaching the class and in what college, but he says he was asked not to reveal names. Later, after his generous thanks and promise to have a check in the mail for copies of all my dusty books, the check never arrives. I begin to wonder, to have doubts, who it was I spoke to. And maybe I shouldn't have given my address to a stranger. Isn't that what we warn children not to do? How could anyone have found that obscure issue of an obscure magazine, to have read a short esoteric poem and then assigned it for class discussion? Who was I really talking to? Maybe they think I know something, that these words are a code and a plot. In the room by the phone, it's growing dark. The ceiling begins to rain. Take me to your leader. Okay. So this shows something of my disorganization, because this poem is the short poem that I wrote and should have been in that particular book. But it's now in, could you show them the my latest book, the cover, front and back?
Yes. There's the front.
Yes, the book is titled You Wounded Miracle. It's published in Germany, but it's all in English.
And the image, tell us about the image on the front and on the back.
Okay, the image on the front, this is a bronze statue, a sculpture, and it was created in the late 20s and early 30s by a sculptor in Salzburg, Austria. It's called the Three Graces. It's relates to Greek mythology. I cannot even begin to pronounce the names of the three graces, but they represent mirth, elegance, and beauty and youth. One of them is the encapsulation of beauty and youth, but there's only three of them. The sculpture actually disappeared, and everybody thought it was lost forever as a result of World War II, but it was discovered in a garden outside of Salzburg, and it's now I'm not sure if this is the original or if this is a copy of it, but I took this photograph of the Three Graces when I was in Bad Reichenhall, which is in Bavaria in the Alps. This is this amazing waterfall outside Portland, Oregon. It's called Multnomah Falls, and it's over 500 feet. And you see a little bridge in front of the falls. And there have often been weddings held there. Well, during one wedding, a rock or a boulder the size of a school bus broke free and fell hundreds of feet, hitting the pool at the bottom, creating this giant tidal wave that injured 13 people who were part of the wedding. So that was quite an exciting little story to hear about. It's a lovely place. If you get a chance to go, you should see it.
I've been there. It is gorgeous. All right, thank you.
And now here is the poem that is the prelude to the phone call This is called, remember that one was called Utterly Again. This one is called Utterly Gone, and it's on page 25 in You Wounded Miracle. In midsummer on Forrest Gladney's farm near Okita, Missouri, oaks are dense. The small pasture is barely visible through an occasional break in the leaves. Who would hike back this far over the rocky slopes, snakes and poison ivy of these hills, and leave with the right eye, the right ear, and the tongue, utter gone? The cuts through the hide are surgical. The blood has vanished. An unearthly odor has kept coyotes and vultures away from the carcass. Something is getting closer. The night aches with lights. Did the Angus tongue break the news that there are two of each of us, and the one they take is a stranger to us all? So there's the two lines that generated the phone call, and the one they take is a stranger to us all. So the poem that introduces the first one in You Wounded Miracle is called List Beyond the Stars. And it the last stanza references Walt Whitman and a very famous line of his about a single blade of a single blade of grass is the journey work of the stars. So, and there is a really wonderful photograph that goes with this. Okay, here it goes. This is up to me. Maybe I'll succeed, maybe I won't.
We have confidence in you.
There it is.
There it is.
I hope you can see it. This is the comet that passed near the Earth that we could see from Missouri. Neowise, List Beyond the Stars. And this photo was taken by William Palmer. I took about 60 of the photographs in the book, and Bill took, I think, 6. List Beyond the Stars. Haven't seen a snake in months. No scream necessary. The thought itself slithers across your prefrontal cortex, flicking its forked tongue. Highways empty of turtles. No wet rip of scaly flesh stretched across asphalt as tires zip past. Just the hum of tread measuring empty miles. The crush of dry leaves clawing away over forest floor. The oaks drop their leaves 3 months early. The alphabet missing so many species. Not a blunt snout or hind leg to hire. Heard only one whippoorwill this year. Dozens, if not 100,000 flown away. To where? The night silence is a roar. When's the last time a woodpecker tapped out its code? I don't know what will survive. I try not to look too closely anymore. It's already possible to count solitary blades of grass. My heart beats with the most distant stars. Walt Whitman, democracy is withering. Well, you know, we are in the political season in a very intense way. So I thought I would read the third section of a poem. The whole poem is called Deflection, and the third section was originally titled Democratic Awakening. And for some unknown reason, I didn't like that title, and I changed it. And now I'm hoping that if this book ever gets another printing, I will change it back to Democratic Awakening. And I think it'll become clear why that title is so appropriate. The alarm finds its voice in the middle of the news. The sun has yet to untangle from oaks on the east side of the house. Someone is screaming on the radio, "Oh my God, oh my God." Terror leaves no doubt that the unimportant has collided with the important. Memory needs to be scoured clean by sleep, but it's too late for that this morning. The hysterical cry shifts from the radio to outside the window. The cats are strangely unperturbed, and I can't decide, is the scream really somewhere near the window, or this terror still trapped in the radio with Orson Welles? I shove 2 cats off my feet, throw the blanket back, draw the dull savor of self from its long cornering of the house, only to stop dead. Half the sky a feather and gray, the other half a blue cut, bloodlessly clean diamond. The grass dude, a wren repeating its 116-note aria, a cardinal slicing the air into mine, 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 and nothing to hear, only my wife's voice in Seattle screaming on the radio, "Oh my God, oh my God." The gray sweep of evening clouds spatter a few drops on the porch, evaporate before they can find each other and leave a dark stain. From the coast, my daughter calls to the furnace that is the August Midwest to ask if the mailman didn't pick up her primary ballot. She's told there was no mail to deliver to her box today, but it needs today's cancellation. Should she drive the ballot to the post office in Wallingford? The answer obvious, but she asks anyway. Complains the car will be too hot, the drive too short for the air conditioning to do any good. Is one vote really going to justify this suffering, this journey and overheated concern? She's alone this week. She has half an hour to get to the post office. I take the time to tell her about this morning. The road radio alarm, the screams, my running outside into a placid morning. In nursing school, she's up early and heard the same program that woke me. Radios 2,000 miles apart commiserate. The research was about memory, but it was more about near-death experiences and the slowing of time. Subjects jump from the top of a 5-story building, free-falling into a safety net. Their screams played repeatedly on the program. She says, I must have been mostly asleep during the ferocious feral screaming. I deny that I was asleep near death. We all do until we can't. Do I have time to read a few more?
I think you do.
Okay. Since we're in the Christmas season, this is another poem from You Wounded Miracle. It's and that around Christmas that we get buried in catalogs. And of course, at this time around, we're probably all very appreciative that these catalogs are showing up. But oftentimes I get the same catalog 3 or 4 times, and it's just a small variation of something about my address that causes them to send me another catalog. Cataloging. Amid the mounting Christmas catalog chaos, correctly addressed but with slight variations that generate proliferating copies with and without a middle initial, a prefix or not, last name first, capitalized or not, still offering all these extravagant sales, free shipping, free gifts, chance to win a free cruise, last chance at these prices. Buy one, get one free. But it's the business envelopes with my address, different names that are the most puzzling. Wendy Vidic, Claire Neal Nervick, Chastity Cummings. Woman or transvestite, transgender or transworld sides of my personality that I don't know enough about. A sybil, perhaps? Is this mailbox a secret drop? But for what? When I enter my house, will I find Wendy in the attic where she has lived for years, keeping the bats company and watching the sky dissolve? Clarnell nestled behind the water heater's warm horizon and never coming out? Chastity squeezed under the stairs, staring up at who ascends and who doesn't. At least the would explain the strange lights that plague my dreams, that too often flare into nightmares. She's curled up reading a book. Maybe I'm not who I'm not, and not who I am, and not who everyone expects. Okay, on to the last book. This is called Pole Dancing in the Nightclub of God. These are all prose poems. There are 5 books. there are 5 sections, which I call 5 books. The first section is about Adam and Eve. The second section is about Moses. That's called Mosaic. And I think I just have enough time to read a couple, maybe 3 of these. Again, these are prose poems. This first one is called Collared. And it's I think, important to think about playing Scrabble. Dog is God spelled backwards. And you can play either word, but you still only get the same number of points. So that's part of the hopefully the humor in this. His diagnosis not yet in, Adam has lost his dog. Still, he grips the collar in his hand, trying not to let go. Arm outstretched, his body turned sideways. He's yanked along by what isn't there. He refuses not to see 4 long legs, floppy ears the length of shoe tongues, Groucho Marx eyebrows, a 2-tone tail curved upward except when thunder belts the windows. He's doggedly tried not to lay blame, but responsibility lies invisibly curled on the couch and cowers in a corner. In the yard, Adam ties the collar around an oak trunk. He offers it an old soup bone. He listens to the tree bark. It howls its leaves into the sky. A hind leg of wind scratches vigorously. He walks in circles around the tree, digging a rutted path until the webbing frays and the lead snaps. Then the tree runs off, and his business is no longer circumference. Adam's left with the straight and narrow arrow of grief. Soon he's collared the table, tries to walk a chair, but it keeps falling on the first step down the stairs. The lamp chases the tail of its own light, knocking papers from the desk onto the floor. At the last, he waits by the door to be let out, pacing back and forth, spiked collar around his neck, the leash in Eve's hands, determined not to let him run off to the gods again. Oh, could you show the cover?
Yes, let me get there.
Ah, yes, there it is. Old Dancing in the Nightclub of God. This next poem is called Stylish, and it's a bit strange in terms of what's happening in it. But this is kind of a poem about, it's probably too much to say it's about good and evil, but it's about that problem of knowing when to stop, when to go on, and what we all face. And in some ways it seems to be a bit prescient. It's called Stylish. Forget the fig leaf. Eve really hasn't tried anything on yet, and probably won't, but she's shopping around for the right disease. At first she thought the most exotic, the better, though exotic has its own limitations. Geographically speaking, the common cold could be exotic in Antarctica. Ebola more than exotic where she lives, but uncommon is probably not a good candidate either. Malaria with its uncertain outcome, perhaps years of flash fevers and night sweats, not certain enough. Hemorrhagic fever more certain, but more random and difficult to find. And there's no control over an aneurysm. Who can say when the heart will explode? Perhaps she will have to settle on an industrial grade cancer. But really, it's all the same, or at least it ends the same. And so she takes another bite of the apple. Okay, this is called God's Juice, and this is Moses. There is a character in here that comes 2/3 of the way, comes into the prose poem 2/3 of the way through, excuse me, called MacArthur Wheeler. And that was a real person. And he was awarded a Darwin Award. And, a Darwin Award is given to people who have managed to remove their genes from the gene pool, you might say. So Maybe Moses writes the note just to see if he can do it, to see if he has anything to say. Maybe he thinks it's just too good to be true. Maybe he wants his own secret, one that God won't know about. Maybe he just doesn't want to share everything, especially after the stone tablets. Maybe he doesn't know if he knows enough to really have a secret. But if he wants to share, all he needs is a candle and a match. He does a test, squeezing juice out the cut in half lemon, dips the quill of a pigeon feather found in an alley, and writes something, a few words of encouragement or disdain, all directed toward himself, then strikes the match with its literary glow, holds it under the piece of scrap paper until the juice begins to brown, as if some small passion is writing the words. He is no longer responsible and can blame the match for all the banality until the paper catches fire and momentarily rises into the air, a brief black flight of notoriety before falling in ashes. Now he can write invisible messages to no one in particular. Maybe that's something of what MacArthur Wheeler, 45 years old, had in mind, all 5'6", 270 pounds of him, when he entered Fidelity Savings in Brighton Heights, and Mellon Bank in Swiss Vale, and the bank on South Fairmont starting at 12:10 p.m. on a cloudless sunny day, gun pointed and no disguise. No Groucho Marx mustache or Joker mask, no white beard, robe, and staff. He was clearly visible to the surveillance cameras, and all he could say after the arrest was, "But I wore the juice." Under interrogation, MacArthur claimed to have run a test in front of a bathroom mirror. The lemon juice burned his skin and his eyes, forcing him to squint. He even snapped a Polaroid, and he was nowhere in the picture. Perhaps the film was squinting too hard or out of date. Perhaps the camera was faulty. Perhaps he pointed the lens in the wrong direction. True or not, the gravity of belief is what holds the universe down for another day or two. So Moses continues with his lemon juice memoirs. It comes over him sometimes. It's what comes over him sometimes, writing the unreadable. And I'm going to end with the very last poem in The Wounded Miracle. This is called A Line from Dogen. These clocks are useless. They only measure themselves early, late, later still. Dogen, by the way, is a 13th century Zen monk, Japanese Zen monk. I'll start over. These clocks are useless. They only measure themselves, early, late, later still. How long can they go on chanting this one tick before you walk out the door? Room upon room, you continue on uncertain. What is it you hope to find? Calendars can't keep track of the days. Vast seasons come and go. You follow the geese who follow the stars. Departure and arrival unspeakable. Knowing an illusion, not knowing ignorance. We measure the timeless. Where do we turn? Where do we turn? Into the turning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter. Excuse me. We have a couple questions in the chat, but I did want to start with one of my own. And I want to ask about this most recent book, You Wounded Miracle, and its origin. This is the first time you've paired poems with your own images, is that correct? And with images and some your own, some others?
Not an entire book. Now,
okay.
if you look at Days Like This Are Necessary, there's like 10 sections because there are selections from 10 different earlier books. And each section has a pen and ink drawing by Mike Sled.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So I wondered if the poems were written in response to these photographs or if you looked for images to complement your poems. I just wonder about the inspiration for the project.
I had published two previous books with this particular press, Lilium Verlag in Bavaria. And he says, hey, I want to publish another book by you. And he said, I'd like to include some photographs. And I said, well, how many photographs do you want? He says, oh, send me 10 or 15. And he got back with me and said, how many more photographs do you have? And I'm figuring he didn't want any of them. And I said, well, I've got probably a couple thousand or more. And he said, okay, let's have 60 poems in this book, and we'll have 60 photographs. And so I went through selecting photographs to go with the poems. So the poems were not written to the photographs. The photographs were an attempt at trying to merge them with the poems.
A question from Barbara. She asks, when you write a poem, do you know how it will end, or does the ending surprise you?
Well, I'm of the opinion that the most interesting writing is, for myself anyway, is when I don't know what I'm going to be writing about. When I just start writing and I see where the writing will take me. It's a cliche now, but I will repeat it. Robert Frost said, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. And I kind of feel like I have a good sense of art, that I'm probably writing something pretty interesting when I am surprising myself. Because if I know what I'm going to write, I'm never going to make discoveries. And for me, writing is a process of discovery.
I love that.
And so that's what I do. And so I have a couple of different theories. One's called the Columbus theory of writing, and the other is called the Velcro theory of writing, of composition.
What is that theory?
Well, the Velcro theory of composition comes from me having seen a cartoon in a newspaper. I don't know if it still exists, this strip, but it was the brothers. Oh gosh, the Brothers Grimm and something. I can't remember the title of it. But anyway, the picture was there's the barn doors being swung open. There's a farmer who's really aggravated coming out, with a pitchfork above his head. He's walking towards a scarecrow that is covered with crows that are attached to the scarecrow in really odd ways. The top of the head, back, by a wing, by one leg, and the farmer is shouting, "Dang, Velcros again!" and to me that is, it's like running across a field, an August field, and looking down and seeing that your pants are covered with seeds. That's you just, there's all kinds of discoveries to be made. Each seed may be a word. Who knows? It's just up to your imagination.
I love that imagery. Another question, of all your books, which one is your favorite, and is it the same book as the most successful? It's like choosing among your children.
That's what you're forcing me to do. You're forcing me to choose. You're forcing me to choose a favorite child, and I don't think I can really do that, because I really try to make each book something different. And so, when I look back and I look at my water trilogy, The Body of Water, there's a consistency that goes through all three books in there. They were published separately, and then they were collected together under The Body of Water. That I really like, but Harmonic Balance, there's a great deal of humor in it, and there's a great, well, think about this. In 2008, there was an article in the Kansas City Star, I think, was it, and this was after I was appointed the first Poet Laureate. Shortly after that, and they were kind of reviewing my work. And what this writer said is that He is a writer of rural revelries and enigmatic surrealism. And, of course, I kind of chuckled about that because putting enigmatic and surrealism together seems to be a little bit redundant in a way, because isn't surrealism, inherently enigmatic? I don't know, but but then he said it was the poetry was very accessible, so which in some circles is an insult. So yeah.
So this is a question I'm going to read. I'm not sure there's actually an answer, but it's amusing to me. This is from Larry, and he says, Walter, this is God. As you know, my name is variously translated, that which brings things into being itself, what will be, creativity, and metaphor. I just wanted to know if you and I are related. I enjoyed that.
Well, yeah, of course we are, Larry.
Okay, another question. This is from Joe and Sharon. What are your daily rituals or habits that keep you inspired and motivated?
I was much better at it about, years ago, when I probably for 30 years or maybe a little longer, I would force myself to write something every day. That doesn't mean it was any good. I would try to write a poem, but sometimes it would just be a sentence. Sometimes it would just be an image. But the very practice of doing that did a couple of things. One is I learned to trust the process of writing. And I learned that to do the kind of writing I like to do, which is the process of discovery, I have to step out of the way and let the writing do the writing. Because if I try to control it, then I'm going to impede my creativity. So the less control I exert, probably the better writing I do. I forget, what was the question?
Was your daily rituals or habits that keep you inspired and motivated?
But now currently my daily rituals is just trying to get through the day because it's so crazy, these past many months.
Do you miss the cows? That's another question.
Pardon?
Do you miss the cows was another question.
Do you miss the cows? Well, there's still cows around here, but that's an interesting poem because it ended up being part of a photo essay which was called Prophetic Prophecy. And I had to really think hard about that poem. Where's the prophetic prophecy in that poem? And then I suddenly realized where the cows are staring into the tent. I thought, oh, that's it. They're looking for an answer to the question they can't even ask. And James Baldwin said that one of the functions of art is to peel away the answers and to take another look at the questions. And and I thought, oh, well, right there, that's kind of maybe a stretch, but there was the prophetic prophecy in that particular poem.
I have another question for you. I read in an interview that you did with Vox magazine that you felt the best way to learn to write poetry was to read poetry. And so I wondered if there were any poets that you are finding to be particularly good teachers right now at this moment in time.
You know what? That immediately sets me. I started writing poetry when I was late in high school, and at that time they really didn't teach poetry in school, not very often, at least where I went to school anyway. And what I discovered was going into the bizarre as it is, going into the drugstore on Main Street in Belton, Missouri, they had a little metal rack where books were, and there were books of poetry by contemporary poets of that time, and I discovered Charles Simic there and Diane Wachowski, and those became really models for me, and that's probably why it seems like surrealism does fit into my style, because I learned that from reading Charles Simic, and I have probably 15 of his books on my shelf now. And Diane Wachowski, something similar, but she also taught me at least in small part, something about narrative, how to create a narrative thread in a poem. But there are dozens and dozens of contemporary poets who are just so darn good. You know, there's Sharon Olds, there's Kevin Proofer. There's too many for me to mention at the moment.
Another question from our audience. By listening to your own poetry, it sounds you were influenced by Whitman. Can you say more about that influence?
You know, I'm only influenced a little bit by Whitman. I think that if you look at my very early books like Fields of Thénard and Mysteries in the Public Domain, you'll see that it was very imagistic. It was the rhythm of images. But if you start looking at my work starting after 1990, you'll see that I started becoming more and more involved with narrative, wanting to tell stories, and not just create a rhythm of images. So Whitman is so inclusive. You know, he's so verbose. He's so overwhelmingly embracing the world in his, you know, in the environment in which he found himself, and I find that very entrancing.
We've got one more question, and then I'll let you wrap up with any final thoughts before we tell folks how they can get copies of your books. How has travel been significant in your work?
Well, you know, if you look at my 1919 book, Until Next Time, that's really a travel book. It's a travel log of traveling around the world, whether I actually made the trip or I'm just writing about the experience. You know, I need to run out. That there's a cat yelling, so I need to go out and rescue it. I'll be right back in 30 seconds.
Okay. I will do a little tap dancing while he is gone. All right. So while he is taking care of the wildlife, I'll let you know that his books, there are several available at Skylark Bookshop in downtown Columbia. Yellow Dog Bookstore also has some of the titles, and Barnes and Noble. So the Skylark Bookshop has his most recent Pole Dancing in the Nightclub of God. And you can also buy directly from Walter. So I put in the chat his email address, and he will sign books and for no cost, and then we'll mail those to you. So I'll put that in the chat again.
Cats rule my life.
I just finished telling them, Walter, about where they can purchase your books locally, and then also that they can email you, and that you will sign those for no cost if they want to purchase them directly from you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I email me. I'll give you my address. You can send me a check, and I'll send you the books, and I will sign them.
Wonderful. All right. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with this evening?
Yes, I'd like to leave you with a line from, well, two things. Lou Welsh, a mid-20th century San Francisco poet. Let me close the door.
Okay.
Wrote a poem called Ring of Bone. And it goes like this. Step out onto the planet. Draw a circle 100 feet round. Inside that circle are 300 things that maybe nobody has ever seen and no one understands. How many can you find? And you know, that's a wonderful challenge to take upon yourself every day you wake up. Draw that circle and see what you can find. And what that does is it makes you part of Emily Dickinson's own idea, and that is she wrote a line, in a moment, centuries of June. rather a surreal idea that there are all these all these Junes in one particular moment. But what she said was, my business is circumference. So here you have Lou Welsh telling you to draw a circle, and Emily Dickinson telling you that your business is circumference. And if you are looking for something in that circle, you are expanding your circumference. So all of us should become workers of expanding our circumferences.
That is a lovely, lovely thought to leave us with. So thank you so much, Walter, for sharing your time and your talents and some delightful poems and your cat. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you again.